Breaking news from Bet365. New customers now get $200 in bonus bets when you bet $5 with your first bet. Use promo code THELINES, one word, THELINES, for this offer. This bonus code can be used during registration, but it does not change the offer amount in any way. Sign up, deposit $10 and place a bet for $5 or more to get up to $200 in bonus bets. Bonus bets can be placed and used on spread, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. In Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 21 plus only and 18 plus in Kentucky. Must be present in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, select parishes in Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Terms and conditions apply. Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com and Bet365 Sportsbook. We're starting on Saturday, October 5th for the beginning of the divisional round series. You opt in, wager $50 or more on a same-game parlay plus, which involves bets from other games, or just standard parlay bets on any of the 4 Saturday matchups in the division series. You then get $4 in bonus bets per home run to use on any market for that particular matchup or combined matchup. So if you bet between $25 and $49.99, you'll receive just $2 in bonus bets per home run. But if you bet $50 or more, you get those $4 in bonus bets for the Saturday matchups in the division series. So without further ado, I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined by Nuwwarah, breaking down this great, I would say, albeit one series in the division round for the Major League Baseball postseason. How we doing, Mo?
As good as I could be, I think, after the Braves got waxed. I've long ago accepted that this Braves season was going to be a waste. So, I fired Padres, so we got that one home. And then, pretty good. Pretty good considering.
To be fair, you said that it didn't matter what happened with the Braves. It was a win-win situation. They get knocked out. You don't have to watch them anymore. And then if they win, you get some excitement.
Wasn't much excitement, although I guess they did almost come back in the second game. So there was that. I was watching that a little bit. But the Padres are very strong. The Braves, not so much right now.
We'll get into San Diego later on, last series that we're going to discuss here on Beat the Closing Number. But to start things off, and we'll, by the way, have a parlay bet for the Bet365 promo, or if you just want to place a parlay in general, we'll have a Game 1 moneyline underdog parlay to wrap up the podcast. But starting off with the first American League Division Round Series, Tigers at Guardians. Series prices over at Bet365. Cleveland minus 125, Detroit plus 150. Game 1 featuring Tanner Bybee, to be determined for Detroit, but could be Reese Olson, could be Casey Mize, could be Montero, could also be an opener for the Tigers, whether it's Holton or Brisky, whoever it may be. And for Game 1, Guardians minus 152 on the money line, total of 7. So where do you want to start off here, Mo, with Tigers and Guards?
So I think this one is pretty well priced. I think we should start by talking about how Cleveland was quite fortunate. But that being said, we already talked about that, but their team sets up pretty decently in the postseason because they're so strong in the bullpen. And I think, interesting setup because the AL gets the extra day off the way they scheduled it, where it goes play, off day, play, off day. I think that benefits both these teams. So I think as far as just like they both lean into their bullpens a lot, neither one of them is necessarily loaded with starting pitching. I think that should probably depress these totals a tad. So I think people should keep an eye out for that. If the games were closer together, you can't necessarily ride your best pen arms as much. You might have to dip into guys like Phil Maton. Thank you, Phil Maton, for completely blowing my bet the other day. But yeah, those guys shouldn't really be out there in an ideal world, right? But when the pen is taxed, we could see that sort of thing. But it might not happen in these games with days off where the NL, I believe, is scheduled Saturday, Sunday. And then for the AL, it goes Saturday, Monday.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they set this thing up. You mentioned Cleveland's luck in the regular season, so let's dive into it a little bit more just because I did dig into it before we got started. Tied with a few teams, including Detroit. So Detroit has also been lucky, to be fair, but Guardians and Tigers tied for the most wins among a few other teams in Major League Baseball in extra innings. You have poor starting pitching, including Bibee, who's inconsistent in his own right, an elite bullpen with Clase on the back end, and then poor lineup depth, really, behind Ramirez, Naylor, and Kwan, depending on if you want to throw any other names in there, but still pretty minimal depth among their power bats. I can't trust the Tigers, though. At the same time, they got fortunate in the wild card series against the Astros. One of the luckiest teams in baseball, too. Most wins by a single run. Cleveland ranked pretty highly in that category as well. And ironically, if you go back to the Guardians, 5 of the Guardians' wins against the Tigers this season, they had 7 in total in their regular season series. Cleveland had 5 of them by a single run. So that stands out pretty much. Maybe the Guardians are a little bit more of a luck box team, but I'm not interested in this series outside of watching Skubal.
Yeah, love Skubal. But I will say, the base runs, which is available on Fangraphs and strips out sequencing, it has the Tigers deserving their 86 wins. So, and Cleveland not at all. So that metric has the Tigers as the better team. At the same time, I think when you look at these rosters, Cleveland does probably have the better rosters, and they do have the bullpen that, I know the Tigers have been great, but I still think, it's tough to be better than Clase, right? So I do give Cleveland an edge, but it's not much of an edge. And I think the market's pricing it correctly. I think the market understands how lucky Cleveland was. So that's why you're seeing a team with 90 wins as minus 125 favorites in the series, basically. So I think it's already reflected in the line, and it's not like you can just go bet the Tigers because Cleveland was lucky. They still have home field, and they still have their pitching set up, so they still have some small edges that I think means that this is priced where it should be.
On to the other American League Division Series, Royals at Yankees. That one, first pitch late Saturday or early Saturday evening, I guess, in the Bronx. Series prices, New York minus 222, Kansas City plus 180. Also a bunch of other markets for the series spread that you can find over at Bet365 Sportsbook. Game 1 odds, Garrett Cole against Michael Wacha. New York minus 208 on the money line, Kansas City plus 170, total of 7.5. So tick up by a half a run compared to the first ALDS matchup. And the way this series could set up the rest of the way for New York, or presumably so, Carlos Rodon and then Luis Gil, a viable AL Rookie of the Year candidate in games 2 and 3 with Cortez out. And then we'll see how Kansas City decides to go about things after sweeping Baltimore in the wild card series. A bit fortunate on their end as well, considering how poorly Baltimore's lineup performed. Colton Cowser swinging and missing for a strikeout in the bottom of the 5th inning in game 2 with, mind you, he got hit by a pitch in the hand in that sequence on a swing and a miss. So pretty stark in a negative sense for the Orioles lineup performance and Kansas City as well. But what do you make of this series, Mel?
I like the dog in this one. I did take some Royals plus 180 series. I also like the Royals in game 1. So starting with game 1, just a spot where I just think Garrett Cole is probably overvalued. I know he's been better lately, but his season-long numbers are more good than great. I think at age 34, having lost a tick of fastball velocity this year, that's probably legitimate and probably what we're going to see from him going forward in the near future. I don't have him that far ahead of Waka in my ratings. So Waka has been very good for multiple seasons now. I'm still building in some regression because I'm not buying that he's a 3.3 ERA pitcher, but I just don't have him that far behind Cole. So with Kansas City getting Pasquantino back, I think that's very, very big. He's their second or third best hitter. I'd have to look at the numbers, but very important player for them when their lineup is pretty weak. They can't really afford to be missing guys like that. Their offense was putrid down the stretch without him. And I mean, they weren't very good against Baltimore either, but they faced some very strong pitchers there in Burns and Eflin. So I think getting him back is pretty big. And I just don't think the pitching for New York is really at all ahead of what Kansas City has. I think Kansas City, any game that Reagan starts, they're going to have a pretty sizable edge. I think he's better than anybody the Yankees have. And then when you look at these bullpens, I mean, this ain't your older brother's Yankees bullpen, man. I mean, last few years, this has been a massive edge for the Yankees, and it's just not anymore. I mean, when you have Luke Weaver as the closer, I mean, I know he was like pretty good this year in his new role there, but Clay Holmes was a kind of a disaster at times. Canely is just, I mean, his weak point is the walks. Not necessarily going to show up against the Royals, but I've watched that guy so many times. You just never know what's going to happen with that guy, man. He's all over the place. So, yeah, I'm concerned about this Yankees bullpen. I'm concerned about them starting Heel on the road. That's not how I would want to set up my rotation with a rookie. I know he's been very good, and I know he actually matches up good with the Royals too, but that could be Reagan's as well at that point. So I think the Royals are being underpriced here. I mean, I like one more thing that I think is really important here that I really like for the Royals. I like how left-handed their bullpen is. I think that's just going to create a lot of helpful matchups for them. The Yankees hit right-handed pitching much harder than lefties this year. I think that's legitimate when you look at their lineup. Juan Soto, obviously, he's very good no matter what, but he's much, much better against right-handers. And then Jazz, I think, is another big one. He's putrid in his career without the platoon advantage. So I think that's going to be big. They have Zerpa. They have he came in and huge inning against he's the one who got them out of that disaster where Kauser swung at that pitch that hit him in the chest, basically, that was amazing. But, you have Zerpa, you have several other lefties. Long, I believe, is one of them. I'd have to double check which ones the Royals have. They have several lefties in their pen that I think is going to be helpful against New York because they're going to need to play matchups, and obviously Reagan's being left-handed. I think this is going to be a close battle, man. Plus 180 is just too much for me.
The thing with Reagan's that I wanted to bring up, and it correlates in a positive sense for the Royals rotation against a lineup that you really can't give free passes to. Royals bullpen sets up well, but just in terms of the starting rotation, especially with Waka righty going in game one, Reagan's has a 8.8% walk rate, so that's still slightly above league average. Did struggle with it in stretches in terms of his command, but still not a net negative overall. Waka 6.6% walk rate, which is pretty good, and Lugo 5.7%, which is well above league average. So worth noting too, that's a matchup plus for this Royals rotation. The one concern among many I have for Kansas City, well, first off in game one, you alluded to this, but Cole 2.25 ERA with a 2.62 FIP in his last 10 starts dating back to the beginning of August. Now, I don't trust Rodon in game two, especially against a predominantly right-handed Royals lineup beyond Pasquantino and Melendez, but I'm not saying I see value with the Yankees in game one, but I maybe am more inclined to believe in Cole in situationally in game one, maybe not in terms of a bet. And then Kansas City's offense, you brought it up without Pasquantino. in September. They have him back, struggled in Camden Yards in Baltimore in the Wild Card Series. I touched on this in our Wild Card Series edition of Beat the Closing Number. Kansas City batted 260, 322, 420 in regards to their slash line at home at Kauffman. On the road, 236, 292, 388 slash line. They don't set up well on the road at Yankee Stadium with mostly right-handed bats. So I know the matchup is favorable for Kansas City in game 2. Theoretically, if Reagan's command isn't a concern, the Royals have a plus matchup in game 3 as well. I see a lower scoring series. I don't have a bet for this series, but I think New York's lineup has an advantage to an extent, just depending on what kind of Reagans we get, on top of the fact that Kansas City's offense has been putrid on the road.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely do. There's no doubt. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be minus 200 given this pitching matchups, right? But I think they deserve to be more like, closer to like minus 160 in this one overall. In game 1, I did have even a shorter price on the Royals as my fare. So I really do like them in game 1. I know that Waka maybe isn't the greatest matchup but he's still like pretty good at limiting, the long ball, which is big against the Yankees, obviously. And like you said, Rodon, I do have Cortez rated better than him. So I think that's a slight step back for the Yankees there. And then Luis Gil, like I said, he matches up well against the Royals, but I get nervous when you throw a rookie out there on the road for his first playoff start against a Royals crowd that is going to be rocking for sure.
Guess how many hits Aaron Judge has off Michael Wacha? Judge being, he's going to win AL MVP and for a second in his career. How many hits does Judge have in his career against Wacha in 18 at-bats?
4.
1. He is 1 for 18 with 11 strikeouts. Now, just to preface, Mo and I have touched ad nauseum that there are some bettors that use historical data in that sense when they handicap single games or series odds. I don't find any value in it, but it is pretty wild. 1 for 18, good for an 0.56 batting average, 190 on base percentage, and an 0.56 slugging percentage against Michael Wacha in his career. How crazy is that?
I think I saw a tweet somebody posted that was like, the entire Yankees lineup has basically struggled against these pitchers, but that being said, I don't know how much you want to take away from that. So, but if that's your thing, definitely fire the Royals. I mean, that's not my reasoning. I just think they're being underpriced here generally, and like the pitching in general. I like the bullpen. It was long, by the way, and then also you have a couple converted starters. Well, Lynch was converted a couple years ago, but also Chris Bubich, who, man, he was having like the best year of his career before he ripped up his elbow. So maybe he can be a strong option for them in the bullpen as well. Just so many lefties there. I think it sets up decently for them here.
Over to the NLDS. First pitch. Early evening. Same thing as Yankees and Royals, depending on what coast you're on. Mets at Phillies. Phillies minus 192 to win the series. New York plus 160, so right around the same odds to win game 1. Phillies minus 185 over at Bet365 Sportsbook. Mets plus 155, total of 7.5. If Devin Williams, I don't know your take on this, if he wasn't tipping pitches I thought he was in the 9th inning against the Mets, New York probably isn't in this spot, but nonetheless, teams that have eliminated the Brewers in the playoffs going back to 1981, every single team has advanced to the World Series, if not won the title. And the Diamondbacks were the first team in the last 4 tries against Milwaukee that didn't win it all, losing to the Rangers in 5 games last season. Trends are trends, as I say, until they're not anymore. So take that for what it's worth. But game 1, Zach Wheeler against Tyler McGill. Most likely it's going to be McGill. And the first time that the Mets and the Phillies have faced in postseason play. Anything here, Mo, bets-wise, or takeaways from the wild card series for New York? I mean, one thing we haven't brought up yet is, I know our guy Steven is more of a trends guy than either of us, just in terms of context. Since MLB reformatted its postseason setup, teams with a bye are just 5-7. So will that come into play for Philadelphia after it worked on their side as a wild card team over the last 2 years? Or do you side with the underdog Mets here, Mo?
I do lean to the Mets. It's not enough for me to bet. I think I had it as flipping coins around 160. So that number to me is close. I don't think the Phillies lucked out or anything, dodging the Brewers. My opinion is that the Mets and Brewers are pretty close in talent level. When I look at the base runs, they have them exactly equal. So I guess it's probably no difference either way. Couple of thin rotations, I guess either way you're looking at it. So either way, the Phillies looking at it, just a huge edge in their pitching. I get nervous when I look at this Mets bullpen, man. That's where I'm the most nervous looking at this series. I could see the Phillies being a good live bet multiple times in this series. Maybe if they're falling behind at all, I think they have a massive edge at the bullpen level. I mean, Edwin Diaz has been not as strong this year as he has been in years past. And the Phillies are just so deep, man. They have so many quality arms in their bullpen. Matt Strom and Jeff Hoffman give them an extremely good option from both sides of the rubber there. So I really like the way this Phillies pen looks heading into the postseason. Obviously, the starting pitching. The biggest thing that maybe makes me nervous from the Phillies side that I might look to when I'm betting game to game here is they do have, I don't know what they're going to do with their starters, I guess, because they probably only need 3. But when you have 2 lefties in your rotation, I do get nervous against the Mets. They are extremely good at hitting left-handed pitching. I mean, the Phillies are too, and kind of the Mets are the same way with Minaya and Quintana. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. We might not see Quintana until very late in the series, if we see him at all.
He was so good in Game 3 as a former White Sox fan, and I say former because I have abandoned that franchise after what Jerry Reinsdorf has done, the owner of the White Sox. But he was incredible to get the Mets. I know the Mets didn't score for him through 6 innings, but still, that kind of performance from an arm like that, just considering his age, was pretty wild.
Yeah, really interesting situation. Speaking of this Mets rotation in Game 1, I'm seeing some people penciling in David Peterson as the starter. I would not expect that to happen. He closed out the last game. My guess is it's going to be McGill. But, we don't know yet. It could be a bullpen game too. I might have to fire the Mets if it's a bullpen game. That might set up okay for them. Better than McGill, I think. I have their bullpen rated a little bit stronger than McGill, so that might be a look for me if we get closer to game time and it is looking like a bullpen game. But it's going to be tough for them to overcome this pitching edge on both the starting and bullpen levels for the Phillies.
Yeah, Phillies in the second half, 8th in ERA among starting pitching staffs and 6th in FIP. And that includes Taijuan Walker, the bum that is Taijuan Walker, and Ranger Suarez, who completely regressed in the opposite direction. Kind of started to at the tail end of the first half, but really struggled. Inconsistent at best in the second half, I should say. So Wheeler, Nola, Christian Sanchez. I'm wondering if the Phillies go with Sanchez at home in Game 2 just because of how good he is at Citizens Bank Park versus on the road this season, just with his home road splits. And then who knows what the Mets do with their starting rotation. There's also the possibility that Senga is on the roster. I doubt he would start. Maybe that improves the Mets bullpen arms. You mentioned their inconsistencies in that regard. New York ranked 20th in starting pitching FIP in the second half. So Philly obviously has a pretty stout advantage there. And then this lineup, the Mets lineup has been overall inconsistent outside of Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil, who's not healthy right now. The Phillies top 5 in weighted on base average and top 10 in weighted runs created plus. an elite lineup. We'll see how the bye affects them like it did the Braves over the last couple years. I kind of like the Phillies odds. I don't know if I'm going to fire it just yet. You could sign up for our free Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner just to see our official bets. But Phillies to win this series by at least 2 games plus 130 kind of intrigues me. Anything worth a look, Mo, in terms of the series spread?
Yeah, I didn't look at the props, to be honest, but could definitely see the Phillies rolling here. I mean, I'm not super impressed with these Mets arms, like I said. And yeah, the Phillies, I think better off probably if they don't start Sanchez at home, just being left-handed and with the Mets splits. But it's hard to go wrong with what they've got pitching-wise, man. I mean, they're so deep. They're so talented. They have the experience in the postseason. I was looking at the Phillies. I'm surprised that the market likes the Dodgers much more than the Phillies in futures, to be honest. I'd probably be on the Phillies if they face the Dodgers.
Well, think how much more of a liability the Dodgers would be for sports books if LA, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but if LA was priced below in terms of the odds board, Philadelphia, I mean, bets on bets on bets, and the liability would just stack up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be close, like very close. I think it's arguable which team is stronger right now. I mean,
yeah,
at full strength, the Dodgers are the best team, I think. I mean, maybe Atlanta, but that's like a fairy tale this year, right? But like out of these teams, I mean, but the Dodgers are just nowhere near being healthy with their pitching. So it's just such a fall off after their top 2 guys where the Phillies are just, and their bullpen is not as strong as Philadelphia's either.
With the Bet365 early payout offer, you win if your team goes up by 17 or more points on any of your NFL spread bets. You'll get an instant payout on straight bets and parlay bets as well. Download the app and see why you should sign up with Bet365 Sportsbook today. Remember to use promo code THELINES, one word, the lines, when you sign up, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 wager, win or lose. On to the final Division Series matchup between the Padres and Dodgers, rematch of the 2022 NLDS, which included, I was pounding San Diego in the live betting market in that game, and fortunately they came back, I think, down 5 runs in the 7th inning, something like that. Series odds, LA minus 141 over at Bet365, San Diego plus 120. Even if Joe Musgrove is out, San Diego has such a big rotation advantage, as you alluded to. Yamamoto is going to be starting for the Dodgers in Game 1. LA flip-flopped their Game 1 and Game 2 starters, so Flaherty going in Game 2 just so they could have Yamamoto and Flaherty both available in a potential Game 5. LA minus 132 on the money line. In Game 1, Padres plus 110 with Dylan Cease on the bump, total of 7.5. These two teams have the first and second most wins post-All-Star break. San Diego with 43, LA with 42. And this Dodgers lineup goes without saying in the mix, if not ahead of New York and Philadelphia. I mean, ahead of Philadelphia for sure, with Ohtani and Freeman and Betts and Muncy and Hernandez. 35 players in baseball with a WRC plus of 135 or higher, and the Dodgers have 5 of them. So goes without saying this lineup is stacked. Pitching versus offense. It really is a series breakdown of that. Any edges for you? Any bets for you, Mel?
No, I thought I was going to maybe be more interested in the Padres than I am, but I think the market is rightfully reflecting how strong they are. I mean, this is one of the best teams in baseball, and they are not that far behind the Dodgers. And I think you see these numbers, and the market understands that. I don't think it's controversial to say they might be just a tad behind the Dodgers. Really like the top 2 arms the Dodgers have. Flaherty was tremendous. I know that he had a couple kind of rocky starts to finish, but I don't think it's anything to worry about. I haven't looked at the velocity charts or anything, so unless he's losing velocity, I'm not really concerned about it. He had a tremendous season and is facing a Padres lineup that doesn't have a lot of scary lefties. I think that's important for him. I think he closed up his splits some this year, but it's been a bit rough for him without the platoon advantage in the past. At the same time, like I said, Jackson Merrill, I guess, is their best left-handed hitter. I don't know. What's up?
Arise?
I mean, he's fine. I mean, he's fine. Like, I'm not a big Arise guy. I just think he's, these spray singles guys don't do it for me. I'd rather have Merrill up there, I think, for the most part. But I just, it really falls off after that when you look at Walker Buehler, Landon Knack. I mean, I don't know who is even coming up after that for the Dodgers. Like, Yamamoto is great. Flaherty is very good as well. But after that, I don't know. And then you're looking at a bullpen. I mean, some teams can just Detroit, these teams, they got these guys, Brant Herter, whoever, who are just coming in and setting up these bullpen games and doing great. But, we haven't really seen that from the Dodgers. We haven't seen them have that type of bullpen depth that they can do something like that. So until I see it, I'm skeptical of what this pitching staff is going to look like after the top two guys. And, dude, San Diego, I mean, statistically, they're not that far behind the Dodgers in terms of offense. I think we all know the Dodgers, they dealt with some injuries this year. San Diego was much healthier than they were. They're probably better. But how much better? Is it enough to close the gap on this pitching? They also obviously have home field. I favor the Dodgers. I don't favor them that strongly. And it sounds like you're in the same boat as me, but even more so.
Yeah, I bet the Padres in game one already, and I rebet it just because I had listed pitchers. So once they flip-flopped Yamamoto and Flaherty, I had to grab plus 120 on the money line again. The odds over at Bet365. So the market coming in on San Diego, as I had on earlier, Padres plus 110 at that book. And this rotation in the second half, phenomenal. Plus getting Darvish back at the tail end of the second half. Second in starting pitching, fifth. Dodgers ranked 20th. And Yamamoto is their best starter at this juncture of the season, but he also hasn't thrown more than 79 pitches in a single start, since he came back in mid-September. And also you look at one of his best pitches, the splitter, maybe his wipeout pitch, depending on the sequence, depending on the matchup. The Padres have the second highest weighted on base average in baseball against the splitter. I don't really want to take into account that overseas matchup in the second game between those two teams early on, just because it was Yamamoto's first ever major league start. The Padres jumped on him in the first inning. And then conversely, in this first game with Dylan Cease, if you go back to the second of the two matchups for Cease against the Dodgers, he used his slider over 50% of the time. And I don't want to say it cost him, but his xFIP and Sierra were in the 5s and the 6s, or at least in the high 4s in terms of his xFIP. Dodgers got to him late in that start. I would think he gears more toward a finer mix between his fastball and slider in this matchup. And then if you look at the Dodgers among the premier pitch types, like the four main categories in pitch types, they ranked their lowest expected batting average ranking was in 10th place against the slider. So I don't want to say struggle, but this lineup isn't nearly as dominant as it is against that pitch type versus among the four main pitch types. So I do think Cease has a bit of an advantage if he does do a better job mixing and matching with his four-seam fastball and slider, which he didn't do in his final start of the regular season, which came against the Dodgers when he gave up 3 earned runs. You look at the bullpen, that's honestly a little bit of a concern to me with San Diego, specifically against the Dodgers. 12.5% walk rate, and that was including once they made these deadline acquisitions, that percentage, the walk rate coming against the Dodgers. Still, overall, I'll take the better starting pitching. I'll take the better bullpen on paper against an elite offense. I have those Padres World Series futures, so I'm not adding on to a series bet or anything like that. Padres 60-1 for me going back to May, but I will tack on Padres game 1 money line, Mo.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doubling down either, I don't think. It's a good position. But, yeah, I kind of like this bullpen here. I mean, kind of same situation as with New York and KC. Several lefties, and I think you want lefties against this team. You have Tanner Scott, you have Morejon, and Wandy Peralta. I like all those guys against guys like Max Muncy and Freddie Freeman, who do show wide platoon splits. I think that's going to be important here. And even Jason Adam, like you get a guy like Jason Adam, he does have some splits, but he's not your typical reliever who is just going to be more of a specialist. He throws a changeup. He has a changeup that works for him that he can use against left-handed batters. He's not completely helpless if he's up there against lefties. And Tanner Scott, obviously, like a closer quality pitcher. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do here. When maybe the top of the order is coming up, I might be more comfortable with Tanner Scott, personally. If I were managing the Padres, then Suarez was struggling some down the stretch. I don't know. I'm not that impressed by him, to be honest. I think, obviously, he throws hard. To me, his movement doesn't look very deceptive, and I think it's when you have a team that is as talented as the Dodgers, they can square up fastballs like that. So I'd be a little nervous about him, but overall, it's a strong pen.
Without a triple play, he had 2 guys on and nobody out in the first game of that regular season finale between these 2 teams, and Machado turns the triple play like only really Manny Machado could do at third base. That's the other thing, too. This Padres defense is pretty stout. Top 5 across Major League Baseball. With the rotation, Darvish in game 2 will be interesting. Just, I don't know what kind of leash he's on. I feel better about his pitch limit versus Yamamoto, to be honest. And then Michael King in game 3. And King was dominant against the Braves. I know that was a deteriorated Braves lineup, as you touched on from the top, but I completely trust San Diego with the rotation, and then to the with the bullpen as well, to an extent, just because walks can be a bit of an issue, command can be a bit of an issue against this torrid Dodgers lineup. So to wrap it up, Mo, I think we're fading 2 of I would say the 2 worst managers in the division series, which is pretty odd to say just because they're the 2 favorites in their respective leagues, Dave Roberts and Aaron Boone. So we are fading for our moneyline underdog game 1 parlay over at Bet365, where you can get, with a minimum bet of $50, $4 in bonus bets per home run to use on any market over at Bet365 Sportsbook. We're fading Dave Roberts and Aaron Boone. It's pretty good, right? The odds have to be in our favor in terms of managerial matchups, right?
Shouldn't be if you look at the experience level of those 2 guys, to be honest. But, yeah, I mean, who knows how much that will ever even come into play. I don't know. It's always just it's hard to say. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, if there was one guy I definitely don't trust, it's probably Aaron Boone. That guy seems to just want to manage his way. I mean, Roberts, too, has really struggled, obviously, in the playoff. I don't think it's his fault, most likely. And I think with the Dodgers, a lot of their stuff comes from up top. They're very I think it's organizational philosophies are kind of handed down to Roberts, and he's kind of told what to do. So I wouldn't even necessarily put much blame on him. But with Aaron Boone, I think you do see him make some odd decisions at times that have blown up on him. And I don't think he's got a lot to work with, man. I mean, the pen is not what it used to be. Like I said, they used to have a dominating units the last few years, and this year it's just much more middling. I mean, it's not like the worst or anything, but yeah, I don't think it's going to give them a meaningful edge in any of these series.
We'll see if it comes into play in game 1. For your sake, I hope the Royals are up in the back half of the game, but Padres plus Royals game 1 money line odds in a parlay over at Bet365 Sportsbook, churning out to plus 467. So you bet $50 with that Bet365 promotion, you win $233.50 plus the bonus bets from the home runs, the $4 in bonus bets per home run between those two matchups. Remember, over at Bet365, sign up, use the Lines promo code that we've mentioned throughout this podcast, and probably the best sports betting promo offer in the industry. We highly recommend Bet365 Sportsbook. So for Nuwwarah, you could follow him on X at Nuwwarah. You could follow me at Eli Hershkovich. Thanks for watching and listening to our MLB Division Series breakdown presented by Bet365 and thelines.com. Remember to check out all of our official bets throughout the Division Series in the Lines.com Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. Thanks again. So long, everybody, and good luck with your postseason bets.